I'm finally doing it. Over a month since the whole Kendrick and Drake beef ended, and I have decided to give the expert opinion of a scrawny Asian nerd. The beef's over on a song level, but I have stayed hyperfixated on this whole thing, just gobbling up commentary from so many different channels on this subject. You know that Ebony Prince guy, the dude who apparently was how Kendrick got that picture of Drake's stuff, like the Ozempic? I have been essentially gang stalking his page for new info as he drips feeds us the crumbs, but he blocked me. I don't think he was a huge fan of me telling him to stop edging us. Listen, I can only hold my load in for so much longer over something like this. Throughout the situation, I tried to stream my first reactions to all the diss tracks as they came out on twitch.tv/Kwite, but I'll be honest, the release times on these were just not on my side. 616 in LA came out in the morning, and Meet the Grams and Family Matters came out after I ended stream that same day, and I didn't want to go live again by the time they dropped because I was drunk celebrating the day. And unlike DJ Academics, being plastered out the Henny is not my favorite pastime while live. That said, I did record my first reaction to all the tracks because I wanted to have them on hand for at least my personal sake. Here's me when Kendrick called Drake a pedophile.
Lover boy, certified pedophiles.
If you enjoy this vid, this card at the end will take you to another video where I looked at clips of Kendrick being a lovable little goofball. Also, only 20% of y'all are subscribed with notifications on. If you sub and hit the bell icon, you'll never miss an upload, and you can always undo it later. Just for good measure, here's also my reaction to the A minor line just to get it out of the way.
Are you trolling like a bitch? Ain't you tired? Trying to strike a chord, and it's probably A minor.
Bro! Full disclosure, this video is going to be a tad meandering because there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about. As I didn't cover this situation as it unfolded, which I wish I had, but also as it went on, I wanted to get to take it in as a fan first and foremost and just really get to experience it without worrying about content. Still, one of the greatest joys I got out of this entire thing was the horror that other people experienced. Whether it was everybody's first listen to Meet the Grams, where they felt the same level of anxiety that motherfuckers in 1982 did when the thing first came out, or the horror of Drake fans specifically. Finding out that Meet the Grams dropped in the middle of their celebration of their beautiful, long-dicked, light-skinned king supposed red button dropping. Shout out Dabo for that bar.
What do you mean Kendrick dropped? Bro, how are you this much of a writer, bro? What the are you talking about, bro? Alright, he dropped? Where'd he drop, bro? I'm opening up Twitter right now.
Mostly though, throughout this thing, I have felt so vindicated. Maybe y'all on the main channel are different and slightly more likely to go outside, but the second channel and stream bums are who I talk to about music the most. And they are such video game OST listeners. If it's not Lemon Demon, Jack Stober, or Friday Night Funkin', these fuckers don't want to hear it. I personally like all the artists I just mentioned myself, but the amount of times my chatters have said, I don't like rap music, my white person radar just started blaring. I kept telling myself I could fix them, and I kept sitting them down to listen to the music that I liked. I never really got on board with Earl Sweatshirt, but Kendrick's just kind of undeniable, and some of them did enjoy the music no matter what I said. Even them, some of them were still dying on that Lemon Demon hill. That was until all this current shit came around, where now every single one of them came running back to me asking on stream what my thoughts on the situation were. Some of them realized they only knew what was happening because I had been info dumping about the decade of beef between Drake and Kendrick for the last month. The amount of times I spilled that lore is uncountable. But just know that some of you on the Kwite Twitch stream only knew what was happening because I forced you to. I made you do the homework, so now you get to have fun. You're welcome. Enough of me sucking my own dick on completely unearned accolades. The main reason I'm bringing this whole thing up is as an anecdote of how unavoidable this whole situation was. This was probably the defining pick-a-side event of 2024, and this is an election year. Joe Biden's campaign was using euphoria to diss the orange guy, for Christ's sake. Kendrick won. He's president now. At least the general public has decided that Kendrick won, or if not, they latched on to the popular opinion that he's the winner. You know, you just kind of catch the tides of opinion as they pass by you. The public shapes the narrative, and the narrative shapes the culture. You know, unless you're part of r/Drizzy on Reddit, those people are huffing the biggest copium hits I've ever seen inhaled. I would pray for y'all, but y'all would call me blasphemous for not praying to the sex god. Speaking of copium, though, please be nice to J. Cole, guys. I need need him to still make good music after this? Man, everybody was saying that Cole was probably frolicking in a field somewhere or doing Tai Chi on a mountaintop when all this stuff dropped, but it turns out he was watching the sunset on the beach. Listen, I know, the Grippy song was so ass, but guys, I swear, he makes good music. That one was just a fluke. Kendrick didn't curse him by taking away his ability to rap. You gotta believe me, it wasn't serious. Now with Cole, you might remember he was actually the first person to drop a response to Kendrick, but people thought that shit was ass, as asses usually shit. And about 2 days after dropping that track at Dreamville, his own festival, J. Cole apologized for that song and bowed out of the battle entirely. People at the time clowned him for it. His fans were in shambles because their GOAT let them down and left them looking a little silly. But history at this point has been kinda germane, and people are saying that low-key he was the only winner, smartest person in the whole beef. Those people being me, because I have to cope somehow. The story goes that apparently Schoolboy Q, well-known buddy of Kendrick Lamar, who was also performing at Dreamville, supposedly gave Cole the tip-off that shit was about to get ugly. He said that Cole probably would not want to be in the middle of the poo Kendrick and Drake were about to sling at each other. Turns out those dudes hate each other for real. Definitely a quote for sure, he totally said that, /J. One thing that hasn't been made too public, though, was my involvement with the whole situation. Yeah, I mean, I'd hate to say it, but that's right. I was also at Dreamville in the same capacity that Cole and Schoolboy Q were. I was a headline act. Yeah, me when I fucking lie, but I was actually at Dreamville. And the thing I wanted to see the most was the J. Cole show. I was telling my friends who I was with that one of two things was gonna happen. The first possibility was that Drake is gonna come on stage and then him and J. Cole were gonna do a big collab maybe. It was gonna be a great set. And supposedly Drake was actually gonna do, but he left last minute when he heard J. Cole was gonna apologize to Kendrick on stage. Meaning Drake acted the same way someone who found out you went to somebody else's birthday party instead of theirs would. This could also be what Kendrick was talking about when he said Drake did Cole foul on Not Like Us. The other thing I thought Cole might do was completely crash out. By that I mean having a Kanye-type rant on stage in response to people not liking 7-minute drill. That or wishing the might of God would come down on Kendrick like Eddie Brock did Peter Parker in Spider-Man 3. And at the time, it kinda seemed like the last one is what happened, just immediately ducking out from the fight. That moment was hip-hop history, and I was there. Or I would have been. You see, when I say I was excited for that J. Cole set, I mean it. I skipped the Nicki Minaj show and went to the J. Cole stage an hour and a half before it started to get a good spot that was hopefully closer to the stage. I did not get very far. Even then, Cole was an hour late. I fell asleep against the leg of one of the people I was with, and at that point, I had drank so much that my bladder was genuinely aching. So around halfway through Cole's set, I thought I was gonna explode. And because I thought it was a ticking time bomb, I left that good spot I had worked so hard to get to go and empty out the pee in my balls. By then, it's like, I don't even want to go back. I'm just gonna head back to my house, and what do you know, I get home to see that J. Cole just apologized on stage. I was cursing the heavens and being consoled by my friends because they knew that's the type of shit I was hoping to see in person. But really, what can you do? I had to go potty. Piss happens. I don't really know why I shared that with you, but I guess there's not gonna be a better video to share some bullshit like that than this one, and objectively, it's kind of funny. Now, from that, it would be a crime not to mention that BBL Drizzy beat that Metro Boomin made. He said he would give a free beat and $10,000 to the person who made the best diss track towards Drake on that beat, as well as another free instrumental to the runner-up. People went crazy. Folk were doing other instrumental stuff on top of it, like doing like bass lines on it. The official Adult Swim Twitter did a Boondocks bit towards it. Yumi and Pat God fucking snapped on top of that shit. The whole thing was a genuine highlight of the beef for me. Drake told Metro to go and make some drones, and that motherfucker did. I remember wondering how on earth Metro could turn that line around, and he showed me that he knew exactly how. There was some controversy over the fact that the sample used to make the beat was AI, and I can see the argument there. I'm personally not sure where I stand on the usage of it in that way. Similar to how I think that the Drake's tailor-made freestyle using AI, Tupac, and Snoop Dogg was a bit disrespectful, but it was a chess move that was disrespectful in the way that Drake probably intended intended it to be. I mean, it's beef. My main gripe with this whole thing, though, stems from about a week ago. It was well after Drake had pretty much flown the white flag on the whole beef on the Heart Part 6, where he showed up on a remix of a Sexy Red song where he literally rapped on a slowed down version of the BBL Drizzy beat that Metro made. And he tried to own the idea that he had gotten plenty of plastic surgery done for several women. I used to be concerned about the legality of putting this song on streaming services. One, because of the sample not being cleared, and two, because the sample was made by an AI. But the song with the Drake verse is up now on Spotify, so I guess unless he gets his shit rocked over the situation for the 8 billionth time, and it's safe to put on DSPs if you got $1 billion to hire some defense lawyers waiting in the wings. Getting back on topic, the reason that's my main gripe is because of this. If you don't know, I rap sometimes. I understand if you projectile vomited a little bit because a YouTuber said they make music, but please bear with me. A few days before Drake dropped his shit, I decided that even though I was going to be late as hell, I kind of wanted to do my own verse on top of the BBL Drizzy beat, just for some fun. The gimmick was going to be that every bar I rap, I was going to put a receipt on screen for, because that's the biggest thing that has been missing in regards to everything Drake and Kendrick have been saying to each other during this entire shebang. But after Drake rapping on that beat came out, in my brain I was like, well, now it just feels fucking lame and corny. It was kind of like when Saturday Night Live catches onto a meme and uses it in a skit. It's at points like that you know the joke is truly dead and gone and you probably shouldn't touch it. I just lost my motivation, but still though, I put more work than I should have into something that's a lost endeavor, and it would be a shame if it went unfinished without getting anything out of it. And because of that, I'm gonna tell you some of my personal favorite bars I wrote for that song, especially since I might never get to use them. It's also was a marketing tactic to see if y'all are intrigued enough by what I'm cooking to finish it for the benefit of my own audience, if nothing else. I'm not above capitalism and social engineering. None of us are. Disclaimer though, these are unreviewed bars, so please boo me if there's some shit I should not be saying as a Filipino, Asian, suburban twink. The feedback is appreciated. I was trying to be straight up as mean as I could muster when running this stuff, but I do want to be sure I'm not overstepping with them by asking folk much more qualified to tell me if I'm being out of pocket. How you gonna talk to Millie Bobby while pretending that you brown? Yeah, that was the main one I was worried about. Said your girl's still growing, got new titties, and that she brand new. Said that young girls dream about sleeping in your hotel room. Yeah, I think I've dug this hole deep enough. Drake definitely has shooters, and as much as I like getting touched by men, I don't mean it like that. My own failed creative endeavors aside, people were absolutely cooking throughout this entire thing. I found a lot of really good new creatives based off the covers they did on this situation. Shout out What's the Dirt, Zevi, as well as a lot of others. I even rediscovered some old favorites like The Company Man, whose videos I've been watching for the better part of a decade. He has been great for a while. I think that's another thing which is just genuinely cool to see come out of this situation. I discovered creatives of all stripes from this beef. You had people rapping Drake disses in Japanese on top of the BBL Drizzy beat, and there was a ridiculous amount of genuinely good animation that came out of this. The hospital bed animation where Drake was trying to act like he won from inside the ICU was a great giggle generator for me. That Kendrick versus Drake in a nutshell animation by the GOAT Avocado Animations was genuinely visceral. It really captured the fear in that Saving Private Ryan scene it was originally based off of. But my personal favorite is definitely the Kendrick and Knuckles sprite animation by Sleepy Ghost. For one, I used to be a sprite animator when I was a kid myself, and I also just fucking love Sonic the Hedgehog. It's the special interest of mine that refuses to go away. On top of that though, a friend of mine who does not really pay attention to this stuff, Brent Daniel, had to put up with me info dumping about this situation one night, and he came back to me the next day saying he had a dream that Kendrick Lamar was Knuckles from Sonic and Drake was Eggman, and he popped him like a zit. Thank you, Kwite. At which point, I very eagerly replied to him with that animation to tell them that shit was real. I got so much mileage out of this shit, dog. There's just too much good shit here, man. Kendrick fans have been eating so good this year, specifically me. I swear this is relevant to my point here, but there is this really cringe joke that comes up whenever rap beef goes mainstream, and people who aren't frequent listeners bust it out. Rap beef is two grown men sending each other angry poems. Look it up. This has been getting reposted for at least half a decade, if not longer. It kind of reminds me of the "I love sports ball" by people who don't watch any sports. And it especially reminds me of the joke where whenever anybody new watches MMA or UFC, they say something like, they're getting real personal and exploring each other's bodies. The way they're grappling each other, it's like two men having sex. The joke being, lol, they look kind of gay. Isn't it funny how gay this thing two grown men are doing? You know, they're gay like some queers and homosexuals. It's funny because they're fucking gay. The worst part of the rap joke specifically, though, is there is some truth to it. It gets to the root of the fact that rap is literature. It's poetry. Art. On the Heart Part 6, when Drake says that this was a good exercise to get the pen working, and he was happy that he could get Kendrick to rap for his fans, I kind of agree with the thrust of the argument. All art is inspired by other art, and whether you see this whole shebang as entertainment or a cash grab from either side, it was still two dudes getting in their bag to make something artistic, potentially autistic in some cases. But the music, the memes, and the visuals that came out of this is objectively a result of the art that encouraged other people to create something themselves. And I think that's pretty neat if you ask me. Okay, I buried this section of the video a ways in because I am terrified of the internet and my own opinions, but I gotta be honest, I have some thoughts on the Heart Part 6. Let me clarify, most of these are not positive. As a response, this song is not great, it's way too on the defensive, and it's very clearly Drake bowing the fuck out with a lot more self-inflicted bullet holes in his feet than J. Cole left with. And some of the lines in it are just fucking dumb. That, if I was fucking young girls, I promise I'd have been arrested. I'm way too famous for the shit you just suggested. Line is fucking brain dead. As evidenced by someone else Drake mentioned on the song before anyone else did during the entire altercation, Jeffrey Epstein, as well as a list of other people not mentioned, like Diddy, R. Kelly, Harvey Weinstein, Jimmy Savile, potentially Michael Jackson, someone who Drake compares himself to all the time, and the list goes on. There's also Drake misreading the lyrics on Kendrick's song Mother I Sober, where he took them to mean that Kendrick got molested when Kenny is explicitly saying that he didn't, which kills Drake's whole angle for the next 20 bars of this verse. That was also incredibly stupid, go figure. You might be waiting for the part where I say some stuff in the defense of Heart Part 6. I promise I'm getting to it, but for Drake fans, it might be less than you want out of me. But speaking of names being brought up before anyone else said them, Millie Bobby Brown. Why was that a bar? Kendrick called Drake a pedophile, but he did not name any names. He might have gone to do that in the future if shit went far enough, but it didn't, and we stopped here. Even so, Drake decided to say it first with, only fucking with Whitney's, not Millie Bobby Brown's, I'd never look twice at no teenager. To most people, on first listen, it's like, what the fuck was he thinking saying that? But charitably, I try to read it as a callback to Push-Ups, where Drake made a reference to Whitney Houston starring in the movie Bodyguard, where the character that Whitney Houston played had a relationship with her bodyguard. Kendrick's significant other's first name is also Whitney. The implication in Push-Ups was that Kendrick's fiance cheated on him with a bodyguard that Kendrick ostensibly paid to be around Whitney with his own money. And at this junction, the most charitable reading I can give is that the choice to use Millie Bobby Brown specifically is likely a reference to Whitney Houston being married to rapper Bobby Brown during her lifetime. It's arguably a multi-angled response to Kendrick's lyrics saying that Drake might pop ass with women, where some people took that as Kendrick calling Drake gay, but that I personally read as Kendrick calling Drake a misogynist where he only has sex with women for self-gratification and not actually liking them, alongside a history of fruity pics that Drake has made public. Part of this perspective I have is informed by Kendrick's history of championing feminist and queer causes pretty consistently over the years, but as a Kendrick dick rider, that's just me. But as far as Drake's response goes, this could be him saying that he simultaneously is not attracted to teenagers or other men, as well as saying that he's looking to sleep with Kendrick's fiance. If you don't know, Drake's actions over the years make it seem like he has a fetish for just cucking other people and a problem with marriage, as half the people he is currently beefing with are because of girls that Drake apparently fucked, which were with other dudes that he knew at some point. Drake doesn't like that A$AP Rocky is married to Rihanna after he fumbled the bag with her. Apparently, he fucked one of the women that Future had kids with. And apparently, he dated Bella Hadid after she broke up with The Weeknd, among a bunch of other similar stories. If this is the case and that's what he means, the wordplay is solid, but this still is not the nice stuff I have to say about the song, because the way he said it, the delivery, and the context the line was delivered in bungles any impact it could have had, in no small part due to the fact that Drake was the first person to mention Millie Bobby Brown at all in this beat, what with him having a weirdly close relationship with her and the nature of the shit that the Heart Part 6 was supposed to rebuttal. Now, all of this is is circumstantial, but to an average listener, it really makes them wonder why he even brought it up. And now is the part where I actually give the song some props, if you can believe that it's finally here. Firstly, the title. Naming the song The Heart Part 6 takes something away from Kendrick purely by existing. If you don't know, the Heart series is a collection of songs that Kendrick usually releases a new entry for right before he's about to drop an album. They usually signal big moments for Kendrick dick riders like me because they indicate we're about to get some more music chewed up and spit into our mouths like birds. Drake using the Part 6 titling potentially steps all over Kendrick's rollout of whatever album he might have coming up. And it sounds like he might have one coming up soon, maybe even this year. Drake choosing to title a diss track like this is a mirror of Kendrick using the title scheme of Drake's timestamp series, where all the song names in that series are any time in a given sitting. These songs are usually seen as when Drake starts rapping his ass off the hardest, but Drake taking the namesake of the series that Kendrick does is a lot more impactful. For the timestamp series, Drake can just pick a different time in a different city for a song title and keep using it. And while we might associate any new songs in the series with Kendrick because he took that format for himself, the search engine optimization is not immediately fucked up as a result of Kendrick doing that. In contrast, The Heart Part 5 is the most recent entry into the actual series from Kendrick. So if K. Dot ever makes a Part 6, then it will objectively be placed right alongside Drake's The Heart Part 6 when searched, meaning the effect that Drake's diss has is much stronger on it. That said, you can argue that K. Dot not giving a fuck and dropping a Heart Part 6 anyways would be metal as hell, and Drake's version is not exactly going over well with people, having been at over 1 million dislikes for some time now, well over the amount of likes it has. So there is a scenario where this still works out for Kendrick, having steamrolled another one of Drake's tactics. The same way that he broke a new record Drake used to hold for every day that Not Like Us was out for like the first week of its run. Aside from that, the joke that Drake made about being responsible for crashing Rick Ross's plane after Rick Ross joked about blaming Drake for the plane crash himself, without prompting, was kind of funny. I'm not gonna lie, it's just a funny line because of the fact that Rick Ross's plane did crash. I'm glad he's okay. But the last nice thing I'll say about The Heart Part 6 before I sandwich it with more finger wagging is one lyric I thought was actually really tough. Like, if Dave really fucked your girl and got her pregnant, talk about breeding resentment. If you take that line in a vacuum, the wordplay is smart. Like, it is hard. And let me clarify, to take it in a vacuum, you have to set a lot of stuff aside. It requires that you remember that every allegation thrown by either side, outside of Drake using Ozempic and whatever was in the Meet the Grams cover art, has not been substantiated. Also, it requires you to look from a purely lyrical perspective, which means that you have to forget that, as pointed out by Kendrick, Drake has lied about tons of shit non-stop and has earned himself a reputation as an unreliable narrator, especially compared to Kendrick. It also means that you have to dismiss everything Kendrick said about Drake that has some precedent in public consciousness, between being weird with teenagers, hiding children, and Baca having a weird case. Seriously, why is he around? But if you set that metric fuck ton of baggage aside and just take everybody in this situation at their word and their word alone, doubling down on Dave Free being the father of one of Kendrick's children as breeding resentment is kinda tough. Still though, all that glazing with the prerequisites said, I did all that to get you to the line which I take the most issue with in The Heart Part 6. If you're still bumping R. Kelly, you could thank the savior, said if they deleted his music, then your music is going to a hypocrite. I know what he's talking about here, because I remember when it happened. It was big news at the time in 2018. And full stop, at best, Drake is super wrong, and at worst, he is intentionally lying on multiple levels. And the way in which he's doing it arguably reinforces the culture vulture allegations that have been made about him. For context, in 2018, Spotify introduced a new hateful content and conduct policy where they would no longer be promoting certain artists, that based on a number of new criteria that they'd run through several accredited organizations on the prevention of discrimination, they would no longer be showing these artists in their official Spotify playlists. That didn't mean these artists' music would be taken off Spotify as a streaming service, but rather that these artists would no longer be put in huge official playlists from Spotify like Rap Caviar and the like. At the time, the two names that came up as prime examples were A. R. Kelly, someone we already talked about being an example of a weird fuck who happens to be famous and got away with it for a while, as well as XXXTentacion, who has been on audio recorded talking about his past actions of abuse and stabbing people. The actions of these artists are obviously indefensible, but the question in this particular situation was never about if they deserved this treatment treatment for Spotify, but rather the consistency with which Spotify was gonna apply this policy. XXXTentacion's camp had a pretty compelling argument against it. They brought out a list of people who they asked Spotify if they would be subjected to the same treatment that X was. I remember watching Anthony Fantana's video at the time on this situation, and I think he put it pretty well.
This over here shows essentially what Spotify is saying. Accusations and interest in these types of accusations basically have a statute of limitation. Oh, well, if you're a classic artist and your sexual assault conviction or allegations happened 20, 30, 40 years ago, then we don't care anymore. I do think it calls into question whether or not Spotify is truly being consistent and moral in their stance here. The fact that they've singled out XXXTentacion and R. Kelly is a little ridiculous. There are other contemporaries of theirs who also have allegations against them who aren't being discussed in the same way that they have.
Like I said, there is no defense for the actions of the individuals that Spotify said they were banning. I like their music. They make good art, but it will never change that they did some terrible, indefensible shit. The issue was always around how Spotify targeted certain people who were both examples of incredibly popular black male artists, while non-black artists of similar stature and allegation/crime who were named by X's camp were not cited as people who would get removed from playlists in the same way that X and R. Kelly were. It was an inconsistent application of justice. More importantly, Kendrick was never the one who said he was pulling the music from Spotify over this policy. It was Top Dog. Top Dog Entertainment was Kendrick's label at the time, and he said that TDE executives' views are their own and they do not speak for him. On top of that, Top Dog did not just say he would remove Kendrick's songs, he said he would remove everybody on the TDE label's music over this policy. I can't be sure that Kendrick wasn't involved with the decision-making policy, but to act like that it was him literally saying that is kind of ridiculous. Even still, the TDE roster includes the likes of Schoolboy Q, Ab-Soul, and SZA, who Drake has actively shouted out in a positive way on one of his own diss tracks towards Kendrick. You can argue that she's not making the claims about Drake that Kendrick is, but even still, you have to hold her accountable for the same sort of deal, otherwise you're only bringing up this point because it's a mark against the person that you're talking about. Which, guess what? It's fucking not, because he misrepresented the whole damn thing! The issue regarding Spotify was never a defense of abuse, but instead that Top reached out directly to Spotify executives and told them his thoughts on censorship. It was not a defense of the actions of the people being removed from playlists, but rather an argument against censorship, especially considering the lack of consistency which said censorship was being applied across Spotify's platform, where prominent black artists were the ones being targeted the most heavily, if not exclusively. If this is a policy Spotify wanted to implement, then so be it. It's their platform. I have my own issues with that kind of criteria, but as a whole, the criteria cannot be as ambiguous or loosey-goosey as Spotify directly presented. And after backlash, instead of doubling down and improving it, they just reversed the policy. Arguably, if they kept that policy, through some people's interpretation, you could make a case for why Drake might be one of the people who should have had that policy applied to and have had his music pulled from playlists. I would not argue that, but Drake is. I personally think it's for the best it didn't go through because the application of those policies was far too vague to justify the actions it entailed. But Drake is misrepresenting the situation as one of Kendrick being a hypocrite who defends pedophiles. He misrepresents the actual issue of the unfair targeting of black folk as a group of folk, where people who aren't black of similar popularity were accused or confirmed to have committed similar or worse crimes without the same punishment being dealt unto them. Which, as an outsider to this culture and these issues, and someone who is truly not fit to make the final judgment on these things, I still can't help but feel plays further into the perception of how little care Drizzy has towards these problems. Jesus Christ, I'm wrapping this video up here. That card I mentioned should be on screen. If you enjoy, be sure to drop a like and subscribe. Yeah, it's been Kwite. I'm gone. Bye.